I'm Erica Zavaleta, and this is Ecosystems of California. Today we're visiting Año Nuevo Island Reserve with Reserve Director Patrick Robinson. Thanks for having us out, Patrick.
Of course, I could help.
And Año Nuevo Island itself is pretty small. It's a couple of dozen acres in size, but it's anchored to the mainland here in the much, much larger Año Nuevo State Park. And then, of course, it's anchored to the surrounding marine ecosystems in the sense that it's really important breeding habitat for a variety of marine vertebrates. It's breeding habitat for birds like rhinoceros auklets and Cassin's auklets, as well as things like western gulls and Brandt's cormorants. And then more famously, Año Nuevo Island and the adjacent mainland are important breeding areas for elephant seals, for sea lions, and then for the stellar sea lion, which is a federally threatened species that finds the southernmost end of its breeding distribution right here at Año Nuevo. So we're out early this morning. It's a pretty calm morning, not a lot of wind, a little bit of fog, and you can see around us a lot of seabirds, pelicans, and gulls, and you can hear and see sea lions and elephant seals, a couple of harbor seals. I've seen a sea otter or two this morning. The role that an island like this plays in the marine ecosystem is really significant. Even though it's on land, it is where all of these marine vertebrates that we just talked about are breeding. And so they are consuming large quantities of things like fishes and squids over huge areas of ocean. In some cases, like in the case of elephant seals, basically the entire Pacific or a big part of it. And then they are coming back and concentrating in places like Año Nuevo Island to reproduce. So without these islands, there wouldn't necessarily be the diversity and abundance of marine predators that we see in a place like this. And we're at the north end of the Monterey Bay and the Monterey Bay Marine Protected Area, the National Marine Sanctuary. The Monterey Bay has been called the Marine Serengeti. It's an incredibly productive and diverse system, particularly from the point of view of marine vertebrates. But as we'll talk about, the reason for that diversity and abundance starts from below. It starts with wind and with the effects that that wind has on ocean circulation patterns around here. By the offshore ecosystem, we're referring to the pelagic ecosystem, everything below the surface and above the bottom of the ocean. But as you can imagine, there's a lot of vertical zonation happening in that water column.
So as we approach the island here, there are a lot of animals either roosting or breeding. So we see all the black dots out there are cormorants, and the gray ones are pelicans. A lot of the pelicans are just roosting here. It's not a breeding site. A lot of the cormorants are just finishing up their breeding season. They're very easily disturbed animals, so that's actually why we're not going out onto the island today, just filming from the boat. As you can see, just our presence right here has already caused about 100 animals to take flight. A little bit closer to the water, you'll see mostly California sea lions and some elephant seals mixed in right now. The California sea lions use the island mostly as just a temporary haul out. It's a small breeding colony for the California sea lions. I think this year we had a little over 100 sea lion births. In the early fall, there can be upwards of 10 or 12,000 California sea lions on the island, so it can be a pretty packed place. Up higher on the terraces, there'll be mostly adult male California sea lions, and down lower on the beaches, you'll see adult male elephant seals and subadult male elephant seals. Right now is the elephant seal molting period.
So the elephant seals are molting right now. Tell us a little bit more about what that means they're doing in this part of the year.
Normally they're out at sea, foraging thousands of kilometers away, diving down to extreme depths at really cold temperatures. And one of the reasons they can do that is because they have a really thick blubber layer. But that also means that they are not perfusing their skin with blood, which would cause them to lose heat. So they do a massive repair of their fur and skin once per year. So rather than sort of continuously shed skin like we do, they have what's called a catastrophic molt, where they, in the course of a week and a half or so, basically shed their entire skin and fur and regrow that. So it's a pretty interesting thing to watch. It looks like they have a really bad sunburn. It's peeling off in giant sheets. But that's how they manage that over the year. So right now is the molting period for the adult males. We just passed the molting period for the adult females, and then they'll all come together again during the breeding season in the winter. If we were to come back here in late December, we would see the adult males start to duke it out for not territory, but access to females. Some species are reliant on particular physical territories, like from a rock to a rock. whereas elephant seals really are resource defense polygyny, so they will defend a group of females. And that hierarchy gets set up fairly early on and is maintained throughout the season through interactions between the males. Then shortly thereafter, in early January, the adult females will arrive. That's their fattest and most healthy portion of the year for them. They just came back from their long foraging migration, 8 months out at sea, thousands of kilometers away, feeding on fish and squid out in the middle of the Northeast Pacific. And they're pregnant, so they give birth within about a week of arriving on land to a pup that's about 25 pounds or so. Then shortly thereafter, starts nursing. It's a very short nursing period, just shy of about 4 weeks. During that time, the adult female is fasting, so she's not eating or drinking, but yet she's delivering gallons and gallons of milk to that pup. So that's an adult male California sea lion barking behind us there.
How much does an adult male elephant seal weigh typically?
They can weigh between 1 and 2 tons. So pretty massive.
It's pretty amazing to watch them move on land, move that weight around.
Yeah.
So another way that the pelagic marine environment and the terrestrial environment are connected here in California is through anadromous fishes like salmon that are moving between the places where they hatch and live as juveniles up in freshwater creeks and rivers and streams, and the marine environment where they spend most of their adult lives growing to large size, being harvested by fishermen, and then being harvested by a variety of marine predators.
Salmon seems like a fairly strange thing to study out here, but it turns out actually that some of the neighboring creeks, they have salmon runs in them, and researchers put out the little passive transponder tags, pit tags, and a lot of those animals get eaten, and historically they put those out there so that they can eventually find those animals again when they re-enter that same creek or stream. But a lot of them end up here actually because they're eaten by predators and then defecated on the island, and so they can actually estimate predation rates by looking at the frequency with which those pit tags appear on the island. So it's kind of a really interesting kind of side project that's going on out here.
That's really interesting. Kind of hard to hear out here. It's incredibly loud. So many sea lions barking and birds calling, and you hear the elephant seals occasionally with this low rumble, and then the bird sounds pretty quiet by comparison, but there's a fair bit of noise coming from the pelicans and gulls, occasionally from a pigeon guillemot with a little high-pitched call. The bottom line, though, is that it's incredibly loud, so you can see the numbers of animals out here, and the collective sound they create is pretty huge. Tell us, Patrick, a little bit about what the fate is of some of these pups and what the role is of top marine predators like these great white sharks around here, because this is an area that people talk about seeing a lot of sharks in.
Yeah, absolutely. Between here and the Farallon Islands are just really well known for the great white shark population. And they're going after the marine mammal pups that are produced out here. So if you're an elephant seal born in Año Nuevo, you have about a 50% chance of making it through your first year of life, even after you successfully wean. So a lot of those animals are going to feed the shark population. And in fact, the sharks are so abundant here that this is where the researchers come to put out tags on great white sharks.
And they're doing that mainly on the far side of the island in the deeper waters?
Exactly, yeah. They patrol off there waiting for the seals to leave. Great white sharks are probably the major factor, and then a little bit farther offshore and up near Alaska, orcas are probably taking them as well.
And in some years we do get a number of orcas here in the Monterey Bay area as well. Tell us a little bit about the structures on the island. There's an old house, there are a number of fences. What is all that from?
A number of years ago, this used to be an old lighthouse station. So this would be the type of operation that would alert ships so that they wouldn't run aground in foggy weather. There's a lot of shallow areas and places you wouldn't want to take a big ship here. In fact, there were a large number of shipwrecks around this area, so that's why they put the station here. It's since been replaced by the Pigeon Point Lighthouse, just a little north of here. You can actually barely see it through the fog there.
And tell us about the fences.
A non-profit group by the name of Oikonos has put those up with the goal of protecting the local seabird population here. So the problem was that the California sea lions were becoming much more abundant and actually walking across the nests and burrows of some of the seabirds and crushing them and eliminating them as a breeding colony here. So in order to protect the different auklet species, that burrow, they basically put up these habitat ridges, these walls that prevent sea lions from entering the area. And as far as they can tell, that's worked very well. The population numbers are slowly increasing through time, and that hasn't really hurt the sea lions out here. They still haul out in huge numbers, so I think it's kind of a win-win.
The California Current System is one of the most productive marine regions in the world, and that's because of the marine upwelling that happens here. So you look at these large marine animals and think about what they eat, why there are so many of them here. They're eating huge variety of mesopredators, things like fishes and squid. But where that all starts is with the wind here in California. So you've got longshore winds blowing south or equatorward along the coast. And part of what that does is set up a southward current across the state so that nutrient-rich, cold waters are drawn up from depth. And those nutrient-packed waters form the base of the food web that supports these huge marine vertebrates in these huge numbers. So we've got that upwelling. The upwelling in turn supports phytoplankton, diatoms, dinoflagellates, and cyanobacteria. And those phytoplankton are photosynthesizing, so they're using sunlight to produce all of the calories and energy that flow up from there into first zooplankton, including things like euphausids, krill, that are consumed by fishes, by a whole variety of seabirds and marine animals, and all the way on up to the largest animals in the world, the baleen whales. And then you get to these pinnipeds and killer whales and sharks that are eating large marine organisms. So the marine food web is really complex, it's really rich, and ultimately it's undergirded here, this incredible productivity, by the wind.
So I did my PhD work at Año Nuevo here, working on the northern elephant seals, particularly their at-sea behavior. I was focused on a couple different aspects of their behavior. One was their foraging behavior. Basically, how do they go out and make a living out in the open ocean environment? How do they find their prey resources out there? And how successful are they when they do that? So for that, we had to track where the animals are going, how deep they're diving. So we literally tagged hundreds of northern elephant seals by attaching satellite tags and time depth recorders. We attached those instruments to known individuals and then watched where they went and how they were diving over their long foraging migrations. And they have a really interesting behavior. They're at sea continuously. They never actually sleep for long periods like we're normally used to, but they do have a behavior called a drift dive. It's at the end of a full night of foraging. They'll have a bout of 2 to 5 drift dives, and this means they swim down to about 200 meters. It's pretty shallow for them, but then just passively drift through the water column, spiraling down to about 600 meters. And we think that they might be sleeping, certainly processing food from the last night's meal. And what's very interesting about their behavior once they start swimming again at the bottom of those dives is that they can successfully reorient themselves back on the same trajectory they were going on previously. So they're able to maintain these very straight transit courses over thousands of kilometers for weeks on end, despite not having any cues available to them, or seemingly cues that we would be able to use to navigate. And so they're able to go out into the middle of the Northeast Pacific and back 2 times per year, very accurately, and always find their way back to Año Nuevo. Maybe not always, but most of the time.
Did you get any sense of how?
We don't know for sure. I was mostly focused on looking at how accurately they can navigate, but we think we've narrowed it down to a couple of different options, using the Earth's geomagnetic field, or possibly very low-frequency sound, so infrasound. But we think they're not using celestial cues, which is thought to be occurring for a long time.
And they're not using visual cues in general if they're able to do it where it's dark, that deep below the surface.
Exactly. Day or night, thousands of kilometers away from the coast, there's no stable visual cues for them. They're not reaching the bottom of the ocean. There's no mountains or anything that they can see off in the distance. So they have to have some trick up their sleeve to do that.
Amazing.